up as well, to be honest with you, Mike. Looking at things, you start to see some prize cards coming out. Too dangerous so far. The Toad School, more likely a tech card for other matchups, I would imagine. Sometimes denying Night Stretcher, which is a 4 of in Justin's deck, can be useful, but not necessarily a priority that you have to grab early. A couple research for Justin as well. Oftentimes the Dragapult Dust Noir build is more high maintenance, so you rely on these research to see a whole heap of cards, but not necessarily anything devastating just yet.
And you might not be able to tell from Marco's prize cards there, but he is playing Enzorok, yes. The sort of breakout deck at this event, one that many weren't talking about, has been able to have 2 now in top 8, so if either of those win the tournament, it would be a very similar story to last year of an unknown archetype winning, as they're just finalizing our top 8 match here, Marco versus Justin, to make it into the semi-finals.
And it's going to be Marco kicking us off here with the opening Buddy Buddy Poffin, the perfect start. You've already got an Enzorua in your active position, and now we can also grab a couple additional basic Pokemon of 70 hit points or less. It's a very simple case with the Enzorowak EX deck, where the more of your stage 1 Pokemon you can get into play, the more draw power you have via your trade ability, allowing you to discard 1 card from your hand and draw 2. That's constantly going to be used throughout the game from Marco. It's your main attacker in the deck, but it's also your draw engine. So seeing this early item card is going to really unlock the possibilities on future turns for Marco here. A great start.
Well, we just saw in the last top 8 game, Piper very unfortunate with the prize cards.
Yes.
How important is it, this prize checking moment at the beginning of the game? We see all of our top players being so thorough. How much does that change the game for them?
Well, you've got to keep an eye on all sorts of resources. You never really want to be caught short wherever you're using these trading mechanics specifically as well, discarding resources as you go. Your decision has to be as informed as possible to be correct the entire time, naturally. So being able to look through your deck and knowing what you don't have access to or could potentially take from those prizes midway through the game is going to change every one of those micro decisions with your trade.
And as we take a moment here to appreciate Marco playing Enzorok, it will be going straight back over to the other side, a deck we are very familiar with and one that has been teched out a lot across the tournament. We've seen many players opting to include things to beat Golden Go, but on this occasion, it seems like Justin has gone fairly vanilla with the list, playing it safe, keeping the counts as high as possible and as consistent as possible.
And we see an early Professor's Research, discarding a couple of Dracloak. Normally that looks pretty devastating, but with the quad Night Stretcher, that still could be pretty reasonable. So a good, well, just the 1 Dreepy so far. It's going to be the Itchy Pollen, and hoping that this item lock is going to slow down Marco.
And that grass weakness on Enzorua will mean it's 20 damage from the Itchy Pollen, which could become very relevant later on, as the Enzorok has 280 hit points, which is often quite high for a Dragapult to take out, but every little bit of damage will matter here, especially when you're doubling it up from the Itchy Pollen.
Yeah, and also the option of those Cursed Blasters as well in the deck. The Arven is going to find a TM Evolution, in addition to an Earthen Vessel, but no energy in the hand. The item lock is making life much more awkward for Marco here. A real opening for Justin, who begins straight away by getting their Dracloak.
There's that Night Stretcher you alluded to, a Recon Directive to kick things off.
Ooh, another Research. Already plenty of supporters in the hand. Might be beneficial to just take the other option here. One of those moments where you know that Itchy Pollen has worked, so perhaps you're less likely to use the Iono in your hand. You'd rather stick your opponent on this dodgy start. That's why the Research is taken here. There's also the option for the Hilda, but it could just be all going to find more basics. That's the one thing we're lacking for Justin right now.
Yeah, the debate of energy over getting more Dreepy, both of them key to those early turns. The Hilda, great for the ability to find evolution Pokemon, but Research, a lot of resources away there. As you mentioned, 4 Night Stretcher in the deck, so great at returning the energy in Pokemon, but that hand was full of trainer cards that are oh so important.
Finally, a Buddy Buddy Boffin comes to the top, and that's exactly what Justin was hoping to find from the Professor's Research. We can look to get additional Dreepy down at last. This is a really decent opener, knowing that the Itchy Pollen is still likely to work because Marco is working from top decks.
And even just now, appreciate the fact that this is the first deck check, so that Research was done without prize checking. A really tough decision in this high-pressure moment. You know, looking to find more Dreepy. Who knows if they're in the deck? You know, that's a tough decision. But you can see there the supporter count is the biggest factor. With a deck that relies on a lot of resources, you want to be seeing as many cards as possible, so Researchers and Ionos are key. But as the game goes on, it's sometimes quite nice to be taking those supports off the prize card as you continually play through the game.
And the second copy of Duskull also in the prizes, so it will likely just be double Dreepy here. It's a 2-2-1 line of the Dust Noir. But just having access to one of your Curse Blast early on in the game. Justin already taking note of those Night Stretcher, knowing that there are more Drakloak in the discard pile already from early research. We have energy to attach here. It would just be the Neo Upper Energy. You do always want to upkeep your attachments. This is one of the matchups where Zoroark naturally can't one-hit KO you too easily unless you're attacking into the Zoroark and walking into a powerful Rage attack.
So with End Zoroark, there's two main attackers, because they both have great attacks, would be the End's Reshiram, but also the End's Darmanitan, which we have traditionally seen in End Zoroark. But both of our top 8 lists are not playing that End's Darmanitan. Is this something these players will be familiar with going into the top 8, or do you think that's something they're still worried about in the back of their mind?
It's got to be something that they're aware of, but at this stage in the tournament, they may have sat next to these players enough times or heard from opponents in those Swiss rounds of what sort of build they're playing. And at the NAIC, there was also a Darmanitan-less build that made all the way to top 8. So I think you can also anticipate that you don't always have to be aware of it. It is just going to be another Itchy Pollen to end the turn here after the commitment of the A-Spec Neo Upper Energy to a Dreepy. We're passing back over to Marco. Let's see the top deck.
Ooh, just the boss's orders going to be onto that Neo Upper Energy. This could be key here. If there's more resources found, it's not. Just trying to force that Neo Upper Energy as the resource to be discarded on retreat. But this just means more turns available for Justin to try and get ahead.
We have a couple Recon Directive now. Already one Drakloak in the hand. Even just attaching a basic energy to the active Dreepy to retreat into a Budgie would be fantastic here. Also, any access to the Latias EX could be very handy. It would be putting a vulnerable multi-prize Pokemon that's weak to Dark in play. But for the trade-off of keeping your Neo Upper Energy, that seems like it's a valuable option.
Well, we've seen 3 decks just in the top 8 so far. The Dragapult, the End Zoroark, and the Golden Go. All of them have stage 1s with amazing draw potential. How key is it to start those draw engines going like you see here for the Drakloak?
Oh, it's everything. This deck really is a high-maintenance deck. You need to constantly have a flow of energy attachments, constantly look towards, well, look at this action happening already. Cursed Blasting into one of the Zorua to unlock your counter catcher, giving Marco the first prize card. You're going to evolve into another Drakloak on the bench, as well as Dragapult EX. And then we're going to fire off an Iono here in the hopes to find, again, a means towards Latias EX or an energy attachment to free up this active.
Well, if you get the attack off here, that will take away all of the End Zoroark in play. Just an energy required, and this could be the turn. There it is, the energy off the Recon Directive, a Psychic Energy down, and you can see the flurry of actions from Justin as he's going to be able to take out all 3 End Zoroark on this turn.
This is going to be devastating for Marco. The Ultra Ball as well, we can make this board even more robust. There's already the Latias in the hand, but it's going to be discarded because Justin knows that by taking out all 3 of these Pokemon in one turn, it's going to give him so much license over the rest of the game here.
Wow, what a setup there. And we mentioned about how important the Itchy Pollen hitting for 20 damage is. You can see now just 2 turns of Itchy Pollen, and you're already set up for the full board wipe.
I think a Drakloak as well, not only taking 3 Pokemon off the board, 3 prize cards, getting you halfway through the game, but also having a draw engine established. This is everything you could ask for as Justin. And you know that there's nothing coming back your way next turn, no matter what. Yeah,
the End's Reshiram, despite being on the board and having an amazing attack, it can only be utilized through copying on the End Zoroark itself. So it will just be sat in the active, unable to do anything. And this is why Dragapult has been such a powerful force across the last year and a half. Such an amazing attacker, taking out both of those bench End Zoroark with the second effect of the Phantom Dive. 200 to the active, 6 damage counters on board, and not even leaving any spare damage counters for potential Monkey Dory. Just a complete 3 prize turn for Justin in exchange for just the Dragapult in the active and the discard of the Neo Upper Energy. This is going to be a tough old comeback for Marco.
Yeah, you're telling me, Mike. That is tough. There you go, Professor Torres scenario. The only way to go out on your own terms. Marco is going to give himself 66 minutes to make the comeback.
But it looks to be game 2, kicking straight off with a buddy poffin from Justin, who I assume here will be going first.
Yeah, he's been forced first in this instance because, as we saw from Marco, one of his few actions in that game number 1 was using Arven for TM Evolution. we have a look at some of the prize cards here. Justin's doing the same thing with this opening search. A couple of those Buddy Buddy Poffin, not a problem when you have one in your opening hand anyway. A couple of your Dragapult pieces, of course, but fortunately Justin is playing the thickest line that you really expect, a 4-4-3 line, the Dragapult EX. So I think on balance you take these prize cards, they're pretty decent for you, and whenever you go first and see that natural Buddy Buddy Poffin in the hand, you've got to be pretty happy about that. So Justin, just like in game number 1, has to be happy with this opener.
I believe he has the other Buddy Buddy Poffin.
Wow.
That wasn't prized in the hand, if I got a glimpse correctly here. But yeah, that prize check now. Oh no, there it is in the deck. I must have been mistaken. But you have a great option with 3 Dreepy down. As we mentioned before, the stage 1 of both these archetypes has a great draw engine built in with the Drakloak with the Recon Directive, allowing you to see so many cards whilst also picking one of them. Look at the top 2 cards and put one of them in your hand, the other on the bottom of your deck. A little bit different for Enzorok, where it uses trade, where you discard a card to draw 2. So a little bit more thinning involved and a few more cards seen.
Yeah, both phenomenal abilities that has got them to this far in the tournament. Top 8 of the Masters division right now is what we're watching. One of these players may end up in our final tomorrow. They've had such a great run throughout the weekend. And we also have a Nestball here in addition to the Buddy Buddy Poffin, so we can even find a Duskull here. An excellent turn from Justin. Getting really nicely set up. Marco sat right now with just the Pheasantid Petit EX in the active position. We noticed that under item lock there was no access in that game number 1 to the Arven combination to get a TM Evolution off. So that's something Marco has to try and hope to get on his turn number 1.
Yeah, we see a lot of these archetypes looking to go second out of choice.
Right.
Why is it so important to force your opponent to go first normally?
Normally, forcing your opponent first just limits their outs to play in the game. A lot of these decks play 12+ supporter cards that can allow them to see more cards or search their deck for specific item cards that can get them into the game. And so many of our best decks in the game right now rely on certain Pokemon that we call engine Pokemon. They allow you to see more cards via the Recon Directive or the trade in this instance. Then just allows your deck to flow that much more. Oftentimes, these Pokemon are not just going to be drawing cards, but also part of the attack in sort of how you evolve up. And that's the case for the 2 decks that we're looking at here. So if you can limit your opponent's outs, there's a chance that they just don't get many Pokemon down. Obviously, in this case, Justin has. So they still sort of don't have to worry about that. But it also means that Marco has additional outs to play the game. And when you're a game down, you just got to get yourself in the game to have any chance to win it.
Exactly. Justin with the 4 Buddy Buddy Poffin and 1 Nestball in deck, as well as the 4 Ultra Ball, typically not wanted to be used early on this occasion. A Nestball and a Buddy Buddy set up completely. And the other side, a Buddy Buddy Poffin 2. Always fair to see those opening cards seen by both players. It looks like we're going to have a good old game here from both players, but it really was that evolution that differentiated the 2 of them. Justin able to evolve into the Drakloak in early turns, and meanwhile Marco was not. And there's the A-Spec in Marco's prize cards.
A couple of awkward prizes there. The Unfair Stamp is the A-Spec of choice in Marco's list. Of course, going the heavy Arven route here, not having anything like the Cyrano in the list, just relying on this TM Evolution. Good news is Marco is clutching an Arven right now, so will be able to end his turn on double End Zoroark. But also that Janine's Secret Art in one of the prize cards. Not something you always see within the list, but there is a Binding Mochi within the deck. So low-key, this Janine's Secret Art can be a means of accelerating energy, even under an item lock, but also sometimes that poison that you would often associate as a downside can be an upside here to allow the End Zoroark to reach on unsuspecting Pokemon.
Yeah, especially the big basics in the format, the basic EXs, Binding Mochi, taking it over to that 220 number, and with the poison could put the Zoroark down a little bit, but when you're against those aggressive decks, it tends to be fine to do so. And that's the interpretation of End Zoroark Marco has taken. We see a completely different style with our other End Zoroark in the top 8. So great to see different players concluding the same deck, but with completely different styles. And that TM Evolution will come through this time and allow those End Zoroarks into play. So Marco very much alive and will be going into that draw engine motion, as we mentioned before, through the trade.
Yeah, but Itchy Pollen was so devastating in that game number 1 because Marco was just relying on top decks and was hindered with their outs massively. But now at least Marco has already established some much bulkier 280 hit point Pokemon and has access to trade, so we'll see so many more cards. It feels like in this instance he won't be completely stonewalled by the disruption of an Itchy Pollen, especially with the Janine's Secret Arts within the list as well.
For sure, and the first Drakloak on board for Justin, so Those engine Pokken we alluded to are now in play. And the Budu in the active, ready to try and disrupt for a little bit, as Dragapult can take a few turns to get going, especially as we need some energy attachments and evolutions to happen. Speaking of evolutions, that Hilda card, a very useful card, introduced in the Black Bolt and White Flare era.
And it feels like it was a card printed for this archetype, because it can search your deck for an evolution and an energy card. And in this case, we're going to be searching the Neo Upper Energy, the A-Spec from Justin, coming out straight away here. The more the merrier with Dracloak, the more of these evolution Pokemon you find, the more you can access throughout the game in terms of cards that you see, and that just means options for all sorts. But also the Hilda can help grabbing part of your Cursed Blast package as well. Let's see a second Recon Directive here. But always good to have access to that Neo Upper Energy throughout the game.
Yeah, Neo Upper Energy typically was a hard card to find. You relied on seeing lots of cards to find it. Now Hilda almost guarantees it in some turns, which is amazing. And now we see another Duskull going down. How key will it be to have those on board, ready to pop at any moment with that Cursed Blast? But for now, it will just be time that Justin needs to set up. So the Itchy Pollen into the Pheasantipity, just 10 damage there, putting it conveniently at 200 HP remaining, which could be very useful in the future. And now we see Marco going. That draw engine on board, the trades are happening as the resources are thinned and cards acquired.
Looks like we can't get too aggressive this turn, thanks to the Itchy Pollen. There's no action with any ends PP up or anything like that. But we can just use another TM Evolution here and get another End Zoroark out of the deck. Marco picking up the Pheasantipity. That 10 damage prod was actually very relevant. It sets up a Phantom Dive to KO the Pheasantipity EX, so you may as well get that out of play when you have the opportunity. And End Zoroark is one of these terrifying Pokemon when it sits in the active position, because it forces Justin into this strange spot of never wanting to attack into this Pokemon unless they're taking a knockout, because there's always the Ends Reshiram waiting in the wings with powerful Rage.
Yeah, we're about to see some high-level decisions that will be hard to follow, so make sure you're looking closely, as these players will have to decide where they put damage and whether they take those knockouts, and especially with the Dusclops and the Dusknoir involved, you're also going to be giving away prize cards. So Justin will have to navigate this one, and also a matchup he might be less familiar with, as it is a less common archetype. So we'll now just be trying to set up that board more. We'll be able to swing with Dragapult this turn, but as mentioned, leaving 200 damage on End Zoroark would open up the ability to use the Ends Reshiram first attack, Powerful Rage, which is so good at returning damage back at double the amount, does 20 times the amount of damage on your Pokemon. So if you put 200 on it, they can swing back for 400, which is conveniently the perfect amount to take a knockout.
That's why we're going slow. We've used Ultra Ball to search out Dusclops. We're holding our actions and using the Itchy Pollen, trying to make it more difficult for Marco to string together any gusting play here on any of these Dracloak on the bench. But there is Boss's Orders in the hand, and there's also Darkness Energy found. So we should have action here from Marco, as long as we have access to one of these Ends Reshiram. That's the only missing piece right now. No, it doesn't look like we have access to a Pokemon, so we're just going to bring up the Dusclops and pass here. The Itchy Pollen denying the use of Nest Ball means there's nothing that we can copy with the Night Joker attack. And Marco not able to string together the best turn possible. The use of Boss's Orders on Dusclops forces Justin to find a means of using this ability to its best effect, or to try and find a Dusknoir in addition to a Dragapult EX here.
Yeah, we looked at those prize cards, and there was one Ends Reshiram prize, but you're thinking, hang on a minute, you've got another one, you only need the one.
Right.
But in the case where you can't use those item cards to find the single Ends Reshiram you have, naturally drawing into your singular out is quite tricky, and we saw exactly that in the last turn. But gusting up the Dusclops, it's an interesting play, as it can find itself out of the active with its ability. Why do you think he's forced it into the active?
I think the hope is that Justin hasn't really fired off many supporters over the last couple of turns, and you're just trying to think that maybe they're limited to just their Recon Directive and trying to force them to find multiple Stage 2 Pokemon all next turn. Because the 5 counters isn't doing much. It really has to be, as the Recon Directives, I believe, finds a Dragapult EX. That gets us one step closer from Justin launching a big Phantom Dive attack here. But it's only going to happen if it can come alongside a Curse Blast here. It really doesn't make any sense to hit into this End Zoroark. I feel like you have to be knocking these Zoroark out cleanly. But wait a minute.
But can use a Night Stretcher to get back the Dusclops and go again. But that's giving away 2 prize cards, which would be a lot of resources from Justin. So the guaranteed knockout with 2 prizes given up is not as valuable as the single prize card given up with a Dust Noir that is not guaranteed right here.
We could go back into Budgie as well, don't forget. If we want to try and play around both of these Zorak at the same time, we don't have to Phantom Dive here. Ooh, that's the unfair stamp coming off the prize cards as well.
Wow.
Justin, there's not going to be a knockout this turn. It looks like we are just going to be, well, yeah, Night Stretching back to the Dustclops. Night Stretching back the Dust Skull as well. There's no secret that these Curse Blasters are the key to the matchup. We're going to capture up the only Zorak without energy, and that's one other way that you can try and play around the Ends Reshiram, but we know that Marco does play the Janine's Secret Heart. So even an active position, Ends Zoroark can attack all in one turn with no energy attached to it. Here's the Iono though. Any other option for Justin? The final Recon Directive as well. Does have access to another Dragapult EX. Again, could be a means of protecting your energy if you pick that Pokemon.
Yeah, and gusting up one of your opponent's Pokemon can gain back turns for Dragapult EX. But that Ends Castle, the stadium of choice for Ends Zoroark, does allow free retreat of your Ends Pokemon. So not as effective at stopping them from retreating, but you still have to find the card to make it possible. So Marco will be somewhat comfortable knowing there's lots of different options, as you mentioned, to be able to get an attacker on board, but does need to find both the Ends Reshiram as well as the energy to attack here on this turn.
This is where it gets really interesting, because I think the setup from Justin on this board position, trying to Phantom Dive to put these other Zoroark in range of a knockout, as we see the 8 counters going on to one of those Zoroark at the very least, means that Marco... Ooh, there's the Ends Reshiram already picking up. We have a couple of trades. I think the big punishes here are a Professor Tourist scenario or a Janine's Secret Art. That's what we're looking here for, Mike. The last trade, do we see it?
Is it there? Was the Nest Ball, which would have been nice earlier on, but you do have the Petrarunt EX as well to switch out the active, so a manual attachment plus the Petrarunt EX would be possible. There's the Ends Castle as well, so an energy here would be ideal, and the board is starting to look strong here for Marco. We've got an attacker, we have an energy, and we will be swinging back, but the energy needs to go on the active to be able to get a return knockout.
That's the thing, I don't think we can string it together at this stage. There are energy switches in the deck as well, however. We could attach to the active, play Iono, and hope that from our next 5 cards we see it. It would be a big risk, but the payoff would be massive. Attaching to Monkey Dory still gives us some outs. It is going to be an Iono here. Marco going to only see 5 cards. Justin has to be sighing relief here that didn't see the Janine or the Professor Turo scenario on this turn. Do we have access to Energy Switch here from the 5? If not, we could just be going into another Ends Zoroark and passing for another turn here.
Yeah, so many amazing options in the deck. Marco just unable to find them. And for Justin, he asked so many questions of the deck with that gust up of the energyless Ends Zoroark.
Energy Switch. Here we go. That at least allows us to start launching an attack at last. Marco can deal the 170 damage with Virtuous Flame here, in addition to the 3 damage counters from Adrenabrain. Chose to take the damage off the active, so that it's more than a Dustclops required to KO the Ends Zoroark. It would force a Dust Noir. Action back over to Justin, though, who's just dodged a potentially really dangerous turn.
100%. As we mentioned, the Ends Zoroark has 2 amazing attacks. This time it was the second attack of Virtuous Flame. But the Powerful Rage is really the one many of these Ends Zoroark believers have lent into, because many of our strongest decks in the format right now tend to leave damage on board. And that's a prime example of it with the Dragapult. 200 into the active would have been able to get the return knockout. And now for Justin, game 1, and is now looking to close out his top 8 match in a 2-0 fashion. Having options on board, whether it's the Dragapult, the Dust Noir, will be looking to try and create a solution here, whether it's this turn or setting up for the next. It's really tough for Ends Zoroark to build up lots of attacks. It's a slower deck. And on this occasion, Dragapult has the options to really get going.
There is Boss's Orders currently in the hand. I see a benched Ends Zoroark with exactly 200 hit points remaining. I also see a Zoroark on the bench with exactly 80 hit points remaining. There could easily be a means of us taking 4 prize cards this turn. There's an Ultra Ball pickup as well. That grants us access to a Dust Noir. That means we could take out the active Pokemon as well without having to use a Boss's Orders. Means it opens up Hilda as a potential option to evolve up into another Dragapult EX here. A few great options for Justin. Now, some easy discards from this Ultra Ball as well. Let me get rid of a Buddy Buddy Poffin in addition to a Dreepy here. I feel like we have to start seeing the Dusknoir come into the mix now.
It's important to note no rare candy in Justin's deck, so we'll not be able to suddenly get a Dusknoir out of nowhere. We'll always need to evolve up through the stages of Dusclops, then Dusknoir. Plays those Night Stretchers to be able to keep recycling the Dusclops and keep evolving, but you do have to be aware that sitting Duskull can only do 50 damage on the next turn, and this occasion we'll be going for that Dusknoir, it seems. A tough decision, a lot of pressure on the line.
We could still get both. We could Hilda for the Dusclops as well if we would like, or we could Hilda for a Dragapult EX, as long as that's still in the deck, because the deck's already really thin here. Justin, with a couple research and so many recon directive, has been able to filter down pretty quickly through the deck, just eyeballing it. Probably less than 20 cards remain. I think with the... Well, we also see an energy drop onto a Dusknoir. We don't have to use boss's orders, but we can also just sit with Dusknoir in play and not even use it. Just set up more damage.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more with the way Dragapult plays. Less explosive turns and more of this posing options on board. And in this occasion, that Enzorok with exactly 80 damage on works out the perfect numbers for the Phantom Dive. 200 into the active, and now for those 6 damage counters. Where are they going to go? I feel like that Enzorok with just 20 damage on seems like a nice target.
Puts you into that 200 range, which is exactly what you're trying to do here. You know your opponent has access to Monkey Dory, but you've got to force their attachments in that direction. 2 prizes now for Justin, who picks up a Dragapult as well from the prizes, which is pretty handy. I see Marco now beginning to use Trade. We did need Secret Art looking a little bit late to the party. Been fantastic on that previous turn with the heavily damaged Zoroark when it was in the active position.
I love that there. Justin just checking what that card was. A card that you do not see that often in our current
Alarm
format.
bells ringing, yeah.
Yeah, what else have you got in that deck, Marco, that I don't know about?
Another situation where Marco wants to try and use Professor Turo scenario if he can, but with so much damage around the board, it's starting to get risky. If you pick up any Zoroark, there's no guarantee that a Zorua would be safe from this stage.
Yeah, and one Professor Turo scenario used at the beginning. If you use the second one, you're then out of options when it comes to recovering damage. The Monkey Dory is a great way to move damage around, but it's only 30, where the Dusknoir and the Dusclops on the other side can bring so much more into play. And with Marco being so far behind on prize cards, Justin has a bit of wiggle room when it comes to using those Dusknoirs.
I feel like the Adrenaline Brain should be off the active position here. Definitely makes the most sense. You can always take a free Budgie whenever you would like, but it's not the situation to do it just yet. It's going to be the Professor Turo scenario. It's actually going to pick up the Monkey Dory here and replay it.
Oh, I do like that.
Onto Monkey Dory, going down and taking out a Duskull. Taking a prize card as we go.
That's really smart there. I love the way the Professor Turo scenario was used to reset that Monkey Dory. You don't see that very often. And we'll just be retreating here into the damaged Enzorok. And that's the downside of energy switching off, is it now means the access to an attacker has been removed. And so the damaged Enzorok will be promoted. And I'm sure Justin's thinking, hang on a minute, what do you see that I don't? This is scary to be looking down at a board where you feel like you're so far ahead. What's next?
It feels unintuitive, but I think what Marco's trying to do is weave in his Blood Moon Ursaluna as his other attacking option later on in the game. If you can maintain this Monkey Dory and keep your Zoroark around, staying on level prize cards or even going behind this turn, that would allow you to weave in a big basic attacking option. It's hard to deal with for a Dragapult, and also you're trying to force them into a situation to use their Curse Blast here.
Yeah, that Budu on the bench with just 30 HP would be a target for a Monkey Dory, doing similar to what it did to the Duskull just there, but with just the singular use of Adrenabrain. And now Marco is really thinking about that end game, opening up the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is the highest damage output at any given moment possible for his deck. But this is so scary with a Dusknoir ready to go and a Dragapult ready to attack and 2 Draclukes on board that could easily evolve and be attackers too.
There's a lot of temptation on this board for Justin as well. So many great choices for whether or not to use this Curse Blast. You could take out the Monkey Dory and just go for 1-for-1 and still just take out the active because it's heavily damaged. As we're Night Stretchering back our own Monkey Dory here by the looks of things, and the Hill, they're going to grab the Luminous Energy straight away. Looks like Justin's eyeing up a strong line of play here. Yep, Curse Blasting, putting damage into the Zoroark, and that's going to be a 4-price win. Justin is going to be 2-0ing, putting himself into the top 4.
Justin navigating